if anyone thinks it's going to be business as usual when the dust of all this settles, I think they've got their head in the sand a bit. Like it's accelerated a lot of things that were already happening.
Yep.
And
it's exposing, I think, a lot of things for businesses of like huge loopholes that they never realized, and how reliant they were on certain things that now aren't available. And with my business, no question, I'm looking at things and I'm like, here's what I won't do anymore simply because of this kind of thing, because what happens. Because obviously this is a crazy situation. So it's not like there's anything normal or like we should expect this to happen again, but it's something that can happen. And anytime these things happen, you'd be silly to not really evaluate what you do to figure out if something even close to this happened again of some sort, how can we make sure that we're not in the same situation we were when that actually happened. Welcome to another episode of Quarantine Stories. Thanks for joining us. This podcast series is a temporary series that we're doing here on the Scaling Creative Podcast, talking with people all over the country and the world just about the current situation we're going through with COVID-19 and the coronavirus. This is just an interesting time for so many of us all around the world, but yet it's a reality that we are truly all in this together. Enjoy this episode with Derrick Logan, and we hope it can give you a little bit of perspective that'll help you through this difficult time.
My name's Derrick Logan. I live in the Phoenix, Arizona area in a suburb in the southwest part of town, Litchfield Park. Scott and I got acquainted with each other when Scott was living in Phoenix at church. I work as a worship pastor at a large multi-site church here in the Phoenix area, Christ Church of the Valley, and been there for 10 years. Provide some oversight for our worship leadership, part of our music team, and we also have a residency program that I oversee that as well for folks that are aspiring to kind of do what I do in some sense, or aspire to have a long-term vocational career in the local church. We provide a 10-month intensive training program for that. It's kind of targeted at college graduates, folks that are just kind of launching into their career. So
that's awesome.
That's what I do.
Very cool. So first question, before we get into any of the craziness about this, what are you grateful for right now?
I'm really grateful to be walking through this with my family. I'm the one that's been running out and doing the grocery runs every few days to get essentials. We've been really diligent about the isolating thing. In this immediate season, I think being able to have physical contact with these folks that I care about the most, like I'm cuddling up on the couch with my kids and with my wife, and I think there's been a lot of beauty in the midst of this for our family, just getting a lot of time together, and awesome. I'm grateful. I feel particularly grateful for that right now.
How have you been handling working at home? That's hard for a lot of people to just the change. I know you obviously do some of that, I think, already, but it's just different when that's your only only office.
It's tough. I read something, this is a while back, that really resonated with me. There's a certain way that we come to understand the purpose of different spaces in our life. When I pull into the parking lot at my gym, I know that it's time to get in and do work in the gym. And my body's just ready for that. When I come into my bedroom, I know it's time to kick off the shoes and put on the PJs and relax. The kitchen table is meant for what we do at the kitchen table, so it's always been a challenge for me to work from home, because I have a few places that I have a small office space kind of area at our office. It's kind of an open seating. It kind of seems maybe kind of like what you guys have there. We don't have like assigned stations so much, but we just have some open seating area. which works great. And a lot of times I work out of a favorite coffee shop here in town. And so when I'm in those spaces, it's easy for me to kind of put on, go into work mode and get focused and do that. So retraining myself to think about the space of my home as a place to work amidst the distractions of the kids
Mm-hmm.
doing what the kids are doing has been difficult. So one of the things we did, we had this small table. It's what I'm sitting at right now. It was in our kids, we just call it the playroom, where a bunch of their toys and stuff are at. And we pulled the table out of there, and we cleared out a corner in the bedroom for me to be able to sit and do work. So this feels like a new space with this table and chair sitting here, and I've got a little lamp, and this is and so it feels, there's something about it that feels different, and that has been really helpful. That when I sit here and I see the things that I'm seeing, I found it
Yeah, because that
possible
is
to
an interesting
focus.
point. Because you're used to, your mind and brain does trigger certain
Yeah.
environments for certain things that,
Oh,
especially if you've
big
been
deal.
working so hard at, like, when I get home, I want to disconnect my work and I want to
Yep.
spend time with my family. But then suddenly you're like, okay, all things are out the window.
Yep.
Work is where family is. Like, it's, and then training your kids. And luckily your kids are a little older, but my kids just don't really understand the idea that,
No,
like,
there's
when
no
I'm
boundaries.
home, I'm in here. So like,
No.
it's, and my wife's pretty good at helping that, but
Yeah.
that's a tricky thing. Cause I think it is the one time you can get away with, like, your kids running in on a meeting and being all loud because everyone understands this is just an unusual time.
Yeah.
But it still is interesting to try to, like, train your brain to do something. Cause there's people that are like, I love this, I've always wanted to work from home. Other people that are like, I purposely don't work from home because of this,
Yeah.
reason.
Yep.
Like, it's weird.
Environments are such an under for a lot of folks. They're we underestimate how much environments play a role in influencing
Absolutely.
our behavior. Like
Mm-hmm.
in a very potent twist of irony. Yesterday, I taught a class through Zoom to our resident cohort this year, um, on the book The Tipping Point,
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Gladwell, which uses language like epidemic and viral as metaphor for the spreading of ideas. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was a bit on the nose, but we muscled through it. But there's a big chunk of that book where he's talking about the influence of environments.
Mm-hmm.
Prisons aren't rough places just because they're filled with a bunch of people who have committed crimes. It's the very environment of the prison incites that sort of behavior,
Mm-hmm.
that perpetuates that thing. And so there's some testing and stuff that he talks about that. But man, yeah, the power of environment is such a big deal. And one of the things we're doing in the house, there's a few subtle things that we've done in the midst of this season that have been different. I don't have it right now because of you get washed out with all this white light, but we
Mm-hmm.
open up all of the blinds. We don't just open them, but we pull up all the blinds throughout the house, and it's just flooded with natural light. We're going outside and going on some walks, and we've done a hike here and there, and spent some times outdoors, but it's such a different vibe when the windows are up and all the natural lights coming in. That's a really helpful
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing to to the environment. And I know for me, as I'm working too, it's just all the vitamin D. I'll take it. Like
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
feels
Have you
great.
ever read the book Atomic Habits?
Yes.
So that's
Yes.
another, he talks all about the habit
Yep.
when you're trying to develop new habits, like how
Yes.
important environment is. Yeah, I
That's
agree
what.
entirely.
Yes.
Yeah,
A
he
lot of
talks
what I
all
was
about
just thinking. He
environmental
does. He
change
does.
is what
Yep.
actually gets you to make habits happen in the first place, because
Yep.
it's people, people don't realize how much is triggered, but no question about it. There's
Totally.
a whole different vibe
Yep.
when I go, and it's also like, the same concept of, like, why marketing is different even in, like, certain social media networks, because people
Yeah.
are going into an environment differently. So you have to almost, like, realize that people are in a different mindset at each one of those places. So
Totally,
it's like,
man.
people don't, I think people really underestimate that. But yeah, that book talks all about
Yeah,
environment.
you're right.
It's
You're
like
right. I
that's
remember
the
that.
huge one.
I read that in, like end of last year, first of this year.
Yeah, it's great.
And you're right, dead
It's
on.
a really, really
I
good
was
book.
rereading Tipping Point. He was talking about that. I'm like, man, I feel like I was just reading something that was talking
Yeah.
about that, and that's
Yeah, he
totally
has
it.
a chapter all about it.
Yep.
That's really cool. Let's get into obviously the reality of kind of where we're at right now. We obviously are at a time where we're basically all trapped in our houses to a point. Not legally in every single place, but we're basically all not trying to go places. How has this situation affected you in any way right now?
Yeah. Probably much like it's affected everybody else. The normal routine and pace of life has shifted and had to been kind of rediscovered. I think we're just kind of starting to get to that point this week. We were with just the rhythm our family was has been in. We were on spring break just before this thing broke loose, and then they extended spring break a week. Now it looks unlikely that we'll be going back to school. So they're starting to do remote learning. So right now, my wife is sitting at the table with all three kids and helping them walk through all of this, kind of virtual learning stuff online. But yeah, I think it's rediscovering routines. I had, I go to the gym 4, 5, 6 days a week. Can't go to the gym right
Mhm.
now, so I've got pulled out and dusted off some 3 and 5 pound dumbbells, and just really getting in some intense heavy lifting. No, it's I'm doing. I figured out I can do 6 lunges from one side of my bedroom to the other side of the master bath, and so yeah, I'm doing stuff that I can do, and you know trying to be pumped about it, have a positive outlook, give myself some. It's like anything else, give yourself some small things that you can accomplish throughout the day to give yourself a sense of progression and and development and motivation, and it really does a number. We don't want it to feel like a, a month or a couple months of just really lazy summer mode where
Mhm.
everybody, we're lounging around, we give ourselves permission to do that on the weekends, maybe, but
Right.
like during the week, we're going to get up, we're going to do some chores around the house. We've done some deep cleaning, and yeah, it's just, I think like everybody else, we're kind of rediscovering what that pace looks like for us in the midst of this time of isolation.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing that is coming out of all this is just seeing how different people are, and specifically talking about leadership in this side of things, just how different leaders lead through crisis is something that is really kind of interesting to watch. I know that I've personally had to deal with trying to figure it out, right? Because there's the side of, you want to be the leader that is, hey, we're going to get through this and don't you worry, all life's good, while
Hmm.
simultaneously realizing like people have to get laid off and people have to do this, and trying
Yeah.
to balance, like, how do I lead with confidence and excitement and optimism for the future, when really, like, right now, that you don't really know what the future is. Like, you don't know if it's a week, 2 weeks, 3 months, a year, who knows. what
Hmm.
are kind of what do you think is good leadership in crisis?
Hmm. It's a really good question. We see it if it's there, and like, I think you recognize it quickly.
Hmm.
Maybe when things are going great, um, it's harder to identify other lesser leadership can mask itself as good leadership, but good leadership, I think, in the midst of crisis, and I think we'll begin to notice this in our own little circles, and on larger scales, who the real leaders are in the midst of this.
Hmm.
It's important to me, to in times like this, to lead with a sense of urgency, but not panic. It's like that knife edge is really important. Admit what you don't know. And which right now, what we know is like we got a bunch of hypothesis at best, right? Like, um, so let's be diligent with what it is that we do know, and we have to make. I mean, we've got to make some early on. A week or two ago, we were making really serious decisions about, am I bringing my team into the office this week?
Mm-hmm.
For our church, are we going to have services? And it was touch and go for about 48 hours as to whether or not we were going to do that and how we were going to navigate that. But at some point you have to you've got to make a decision and lean into your best options in those things. And I think doing that, not as a panic response to what's going on, but just with a measured sense of urgency. You need steady hands, man. Like, poise in the midst of this stuff is a big deal. And in my own little corner of the world, I'm becoming. I see where I've navigated that well at times, and times that I haven't navigated that as well. Uh, you might have saw me a second ago. I was checking a text message that I've got. I've got a phone call to make today because I sent an email yesterday expressing some concern about something that happened on our team, and when I hit send on that email, it was a little bit too emotionally infused with some. I, I didn't agree with the decision that was made, and something that we did, and the way I articulated myself was lacking in poise. Like, I should have been a little bit more measured in the way. And so maybe in some ways with my team, I feel like I've navigated this well and in a helpful way. And other times maybe I get, I lack that in some ways. So I think particularly in times like this, sense of urgency without panic, and poise, a steady hand, it promotes trust. It
Mm-hmm.
promotes like this sense of calm in the midst of the midst of an uncertain storm that I think is just, it's really, really important that we have that. And so trying to be that in our little corners of the universe and steward that influence the best we can is really important. It's not just about all of the national leaders exhibiting this. I think all of us are playing an influential role. We're all more connected now than we've ever been in
Mm-hmm.
the history of the human race. Like, we all have influence to steward. And I think uh, my kids are looking at me.
Mm-hmm.
My wife's looking to me. I'm looking to my wife. Like, I'm feeding off of my friends and all this stuff too. So if I can, yeah, if I can be poised and have a steady hand in the midst of this, I think that's the game. Admit what we don't know, make the best decisions we can, and try to just make some steady, measured decisions
Yeah,
as
because
we're
I think that's the most important part is because we are in uncharted territory in this, and
mm-hmm.
so we'd also be lying to ourselves and to our teams if we acted like we have this all together. Like
Mm-hmm.
there are certain answers to questions people are going to ask that the answer is going to be, listen, I don't really know the answer,
Yep.
but you have to know that we're all, we're doing our best. Like, I think that I found that this is even a time that is tricky for me to kind of navigate the idea of trying not to be overly hard on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because you're gonna send a couple emails you might not want to, or you're gonna have conversations you might not want to. You're gonna say something that sounds a lot worse than it actually meant because I think our emotions are just all over the place. And being really honest and vulnerable with your team of understanding that, like, it's it's as uncertain to you as it is to them. And
Yep.
you're trying your absolute best, but if you try as much as you can to just do everything with love and with grace in the best way possible, and
Yeah.
know that as crappy as the situation is to you, it's also crappy to them, and as uncertain as it is to you, it's also. So understanding that, like, we just have to love people, we have to attempt in every way possible to just realize, listen, we're going through this, and we're on the same page. Like, trying to, at least.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I mean, it's nail on the head. I think particularly in times like this, man, lean. err on the side of grace, err on
Hmm.
the side of love, and err on the side of generosity. You
We
know,
should do that all the time, right? It would be a
we
lot better
should.
if
I,
people
I,
did
yep.
everything like that.
I think it's particularly potent and helpful in times like this. We've got some decisions to make, man, about, um, we have a lot of contracted folks that are part of our church. So
Hmm.
people that aren't salaried staff that are paid when they do something, and how do we, those folks rely on this in large part for their livelihood. So
Right.
how do we navigate that? And it's, it, we're, I'm proud to say we're erring very heavily on the side of grace, and trying to do what's right in the midst of a bunch of uncertainty. It's at significant, um, I don't know if risk is the right word, but we're, you know, I don't know, it's a lot to kind of manage and steward and all of that stuff too. And I'm sure in the wake of all of this, we're going to reevaluate
Hmm.
our form and how it is that we're navigating these things, and can we sustain another disruption like this should it happen again. Everybody's going to be asking these questions, but
Yeah.
yeah, man, I think if we can err on the side of love and generosity and grace, particularly in times like this, all the time,
Yep.
but uh in an intensified way in times like this, it's so helpful, exponentially helpful. But
Yeah. No,
that's
and I
good.
think it would be a great lesson for us to, learn
Yeah.
as a nation during this time of the fact that that's just always a better option.
Hmm.
If you can, like, it's
Totally.
always easier to have a conversation with someone when they know that ultimately you care about them and you love
Yeah.
them and you care for them. It's because you trust people, and it's from all leadership at the top in our nation and just around the world. If people could just realize that at the end of the day, like, we're all humans that mess up all the time, and we just need to love people better and
Yeah.
realize that, I mean, crisis or not, hopefully the crisis will bring some of that together,
Yeah.
and you see people together that might not normally be, which is great. But how we come out of this, I think, hopefully is better. And just that alone of, like, that is an interesting thing, like you said, that this is the first time, like, ever that worldwide we're going through the exact same thing. It's like when we were going through
Totally.
depression or some
Yeah.
recessions, different things, other countries weren't in the same boat. This is the first time that
Yeah.
every news around the world is going through the same thing.
Yeah.
It's really, really interesting.
When half the world's going through summer, it's winter on the other
Yeah.
half of the world. Like we're never doing the same thing. So
Yeah.
that we are all walking through this same thing is really, it's remarkable. And coming back to what we were talking about before too, this is not to say like at a particular, I mean, as a small business owner, Scott, you would know better than anyone. You have to, sometimes you got to make impossible decisions. You
Mm-hmm.
got to make hard, like if the money's not there to pay people,
Mm-hmm.
like you
There's
can't
nothing you could do.
there's nothing you can do. You can't go
Yeah.
print more of that. Like
Yeah.
so you have to, sometimes you got to make tough decisions, and
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to navigate those things.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel like love or grace
Yeah. Yeah.
in those moments, but it's not to say that you just keep writing checks all day
Right.
and assume that things are going to work out in the end, and keep running the credit card up, whatever it
Right.
is. Like you can't, you got to make tough decisions, but yeah, that extra measure of love and grace, I
Yep.
think pays dividends. That's the long game, man. Like
Mm-hmm.
that, it pays off in the long run.
So I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you think about a time in your life that, obviously nothing probably compares to just the weirdness of this exact situation, but can you think of a time that there was uncertainty, devastation, heartache, whatever it was, that when you were in it, you felt like maybe that same idea of, I don't know how in the world this is going to end, and it just seems like a time that I really don't want to have to go through again. But looking back on it now, you can be like, man, if it wasn't for that, I would never be in the situation that I'm in, or I'm dealing with something now that because of that, I'm able to do this.
Yeah. It's the advantage of hindsight. You realize that all of these moments in your life, at least in my experience, like so many of them, the times in my life that I leveled up as a human being, that I moved, that I clearly just moved from one notch to another, were in the midst of crisis, like in the
Mm-hmm.
midst of a difficult season, losing a job, a business venture that did not pan out, and you are counting on that, and it just dissipated.
Mm-hmm.
It went away. Um, and in the midst of that uncertainty, yeah, I've had a number of those experiences. Not nothing quite like this, but yeah, I've lost a job, and I lost a job that I didn't even wasn't even a job that I liked or cared about. But it's like, if I can't hold on to a crappy job like this, what what makes me think that I'm going to possibly be able to
Yeah.
get something that like hold on to something that I really would love, not being sure how we're going to make ends meet, you know, financially. I mean, right after Jude was born, we made the decision for Kim to stay home, and she had been a school teacher, and it was going to be really tight. But between that and some other photography work that she was doing at the time, she was going into business with a friend. We were thinking, like, you know what, maybe it's going to be kind of tight, but with these things, this will give you the flexibility to stay home a lot, and the photography stuff we can kind of work around my schedule. And long story short, the photography business thing, like, just fizzled out very, very quickly, and there was some, yeah, it was devastating. But we lost money, and not only were we not earning money, we lost a bunch of money. So that left us in this spot of like, what do we do now? How are we going to make? And of course, some way, somehow, you figure it out, and
Mm-hmm.
we're going to get through this week. We're going to get through this month. We're going to pay the mortgage. All right, we made the mortgage payment this month. The electricity stays on another month,
Mm-hmm.
and you figure it out, like it's just one foot in front of the other. And in the midst of that, you learn something about yourself. You develop. I think it's in those times that we become better. It's really hard to get better when things are going great. I mean, even just the act of going to the gym
Mm-hmm.
is forcing your body to do a bunch of things that are really, really hard, that you
Mm-hmm.
like, maybe even pushing yourself beyond what it is that you're capable of doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point of it, because this is what yields muscle development. Like, this is what yields endurance. You have to do these things. So this is yes, it's hard. Like, what we're going through is hard. But if we're paying attention, and we're present in the midst of these things, like, it can be such a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's so much that we can learn from, this is such a unique situation. It's a unique difficulty. Um, and I'm very optimistic and excited about all of the things that we will have the potential to learn, um, and develop in, because of the experience collectively. I think, we can learn things right now. We're growing right now by enduring this, and I think the lessons to come in the wake of this are going to be right volumes on it. And
Yep.
I'm very optimistic about that, and not just for myself personally. I think for humanity on the whole, like, there's going to be so much potential to grow and to gain from this difficulty, because this is what humans do.
I don't know how this all plays out and how long it plays out, but I do know that, like, Lord willing, I'll still be here and
Yeah.
I'll learn from it. You can either look at the situations and be bitter, or you can hopefully look at them and be better. And so I'm just trying my best to get people to hopefully see through the midst of these that it is what it is. We can't change what's currently happening. Like,
No.
there's nothing each person can do right this second that just is going to make this disappear. So all we can do is persevere through it.
Yeah. That
And
feels like
learn.
such a gift. It feels like such a gift. Like, here's the reality. Like, control is basically a total illusion, right?
Mm-hmm,
We all
mm-hmm,
feel like we're in control. And then coronavirus hits and we
mm-hmm,
realize none of us are in control.
mm-hmm,
Like, you can control your actions for the most part, and you can control your attitude and your, the way that you're thinking about things, your outlook on stuff. You have some influence in those things. Outside of that, man, like, we don't we don't have a lot of control. Like,
mm-hmm.
it's very much about how we're navigating and stewarding the very, very few things that we do have control about
Mm-hmm.
over. And yeah, it's, I think, realizing that the world's being brought to its knees. That realizing that we're not in control, that things are not
Mm-hmm.
as stable as we, uh, it's going to be a net positive. I'm very optimistic about that.
Well, I appreciate it. Appreciate your time, and appreciate your insight as always, and your leadership. You've always been obviously a good leader of people, and hopefully as leaders in this nation, around the world, we can continue to just get better at leading people and loving people and caring about people and all that stuff. So appreciate your
Absolutely,
time,
man.
and we'll keep in touch as always.
So appreciate you, Scott. Thanks for having me. Very humbled to be able to join you here today. Thanks, man.
Awesome.